Hello, class. This is an article about analyzing historical photographs to promote civic competence. So you can bring in photographs to your lessons and make them a whole lot better. But, we kind of think, well, photographs, we'll just do that by just throwing some photographs up, and it really doesn't work. So we need to have a better way to show photographs. It says right here that adults tend to use text, print, and online news articles, letters, and legal contracts to make sense of the world, but written documents tend to hold far less significance for modern students. So our modern students with Instagram, Facebook, and all the technology we have like to see photographs, but teachers do not teach them well. So this is going to give you kind of a lesson plan on how to really bring in some really good photographs. One of the first terms they use right here is called visual literacy. So we want to go ahead and watch this next video on what visual literacy is.
So what is visual literacy? Well, art museums can teach a lot about it because art is a language. It's a form of communication. So to be visually literate, you've got to know the alphabet and the vocabulary and the grammar of seeing. Little children, we're told, from the first day they have on the planet up to the age of 5, take in more information than at any other time in their lives. They're truly sentient beings taking in information with all their human senses all the time. Everything we see is an image. There really isn't a difference between text and image because a text is an image and an image is a text. So we have to learn how to read images through the process of vision. Now we know that today we live in a media-saturated age, an image-saturated age, where we're taking in images all the time. And we need to broaden what it means to be literate, to read images rather than text as image. So it's more than reading and writing. It's reading the visual world. 21st century students' studies tell us young people today are consuming images at an extraordinary rate. In the last 4 years, we're told, young people are actually looking at images throughout the day 1 hour and 17 minutes more than they used to. So that's actually 7 hours and 38 minutes every day. Extraordinary, but how many young children have actually been taught how to read images? How many teachers have done a course in not just the process of vision, but how to read images, whether at college or university? The use of every type of media has increased over the last decade, except reading. We need to learn how to read and to read images. It's considerably a question that is socioeconomic. If you're a child from a lower income family, you've been read to on average about 100 hours by the age of 5. But if you're from an upper income or middle income family, you've been read to over 1,000 hours by the age of 5. So you're 10 times more advantaged going to school. Visual literacy is essential because we need to be able to construct meaning, to make sense of everything that we see. What does this mean? Why did the Toledo Museum of Art put this strange red thing in front of this building, this very formal, classic building with all its straight lines? And this curvaceous underbody of this spiky, angular creature? Well, we wanted to have fun. We wanted to make sure that young people would feel it's fun to go into the museum. It's not austere. It's a welcoming place. Visual literacy has been around for a long time, but it's difficult because there are so many different definitions of it. And we have to make it understandable so it becomes part of the curriculum. The International Visual Literacy Association started in the late 1960s. They have a journal and they have an annual conference. And the first real primer on visual literacy was published in 1973, and there have been many books since. So, what does this mean? Looking at this image, you see these young people all dressed in red and white striped outfits. Some of you will know Where's Waldo or Where's Wally, a game where you search for the Waldo or Wally that's different from all the others. So what does this mean? Well, if you're a focal point learner, if you're somebody who's been trained on ABC 1, 2, 3, with focal point perspective, you'll probably train your eye to look all around this image. You'll move your eyes all around until you find the Wally or the Waldo that's different. But if you're somebody who's actually challenged with reading and writing, or you grow up in a culture that doesn't emphasize textual learning, you'll probably scan or scope this image. That's how most people were until 500 years ago when we had the printed book revolution. A visually literate person is, simply put, able to read and write visual language. Visual literacy is a process of sending and receiving images. They make messages. We can construct meaning from them. And then we can combine all the different literacies that we have to read our multimedia world. Visual literacy is the ability to construct meaning from images. So it's not actually a skill, it uses skills as a toolbox. It's a form of critical thinking that enhances your intellectual capacity. It helps you to interpret the content and the meaning of images, to examine their social impact, to think about them from the point of view of, well, what was intended, what was their purpose, who owns them, who are they being sent to, and helping you to visualize, the process of visualization and human imagination. Visual literacy helps you to communicate visually, to read and write images, to read and understand them, to make sense of them, to become aware of judgments about them, whether they're accurate, are they valid, what are they worth, what value do they have. So what does this mean? People from Toledo, Ohio will know this as the peristyle theatre of the Toledo Museum of Art. But it's certainly grand. It's made to impress. It's powerful. It's got lots of seats. It's very grand. It's a place that inspires awe and imagination in every young person that sees it, because we know to read it is to feel special and to feel inspired. Today, our education system emphasizes textual literacy, those ABCs, 1, 2, 3s, the digits and letters. And of course, rightly so also, digital communication, the tools of our digital revolution. But we neglect sensory literacy, those human senses, as core curriculum. So, textual literacy and computer literacy are the core of the STEM system, as we call it. Some people want to put the A in STEM, the arts in STEM, the science, technology, engineering and math. But it's much more than that. We need to put the entire human senses into textual and computer literacy. And the dominant sense, the prominent sense, is the visual sense. Visual literacy is the key sensory literacy. We have to teach it because since we became erect human beings standing up, we moved away from when we were closer to primates nearer to the ground and used taste and smell. And now we dominantly use hearing, but mainly we use our sight. And we need to train ourselves how to see. There have been only 3 communications revolutions of grand scale in human history. So to be living one is indeed confusing. It's a very exciting time to be alive, but we're trying to absorb a revolution. The first communications revolution was 5,000 years ago in the Sumerian Empire, when they invented cuneiform writing. And it took a whole 4,500 years to get to the next great revolution, the printed book revolution, the Gutenberg revolution as it's called, of the 15th century in Europe. And so we learned our ABCs and our 1, 2, 3s, and we moved forward only 500 years this time to the third great revolution, which is the digital revolution of our time. All students who graduated in 2013 have had the internet since the day they were born. It went live on Christmas Day in 1991. So we need to continue to teach the human senses, to understand that little child before the age of 5 is the adult that they will become. And the human senses being so important, we need to understand vision. That up to 90% of all the information we take in from the world, we take in with our eyes. It becomes that great memory bank of images that informs the way that we see the world. Now, the optic nerve has 1 million nerve fibers. It has 30% of the entire brain cortex, and that's so much more than any other human sense. But we understand so much more about it now because of brain science, and all that cognitive neuroscience has taught us through the digital revolution. The key message is that we have to be more visually literate, and we need to train people how to see. To do that, first of all, you need to take your time. You need to pay attention. Museums use lots of techniques to train people how to see. One is a technique like this, learning to look. When we look at something, we often make assumptions about it. We've already decided what it is because we've seen it before. But if we really look at it, we take our time and we start to see it. When we can really see it, we can begin to describe it very accurately. And after describing it, we can ask analytical questions about it, like, what's it made of? And when we've gone through this 4-stage process, we then begin to construct meaning. We begin to make sense of what we see. We begin to become visually literate. Look at this image. It's an image of a painting by Thomas Cole in the Toledo Museum of Art collection called The Architect's Dream. You can pause here if you like. Now, imagine what you've seen and place it on this black background. Can you fill in the big picture and all the details? Did you go to the details first and then to the big picture? Pause and try and paint the picture for yourself. Here it is again. What did you see? Now, in terms of learning the grammar of how to look, a good approach is to study the visual elements of art. You can use these to look at any image and to think about it in terms of its line, those continuous marks with height and width that have no depth, or its shape, the enclosed area that defines the other elements in a composition, such as line, or colour, which is the full light spectrum and the black and white, all the possible combinations that you can make in terms of hue, which is the name that we give to the colours, or the intensity, which is the purity we give to them, or the value of them, which is the degree of lightness or darkness that they have. And then we can think about space, those areas around or within objects and the arrangement of them on the surface, or texture, the tactile quality of an object. Then you can apply these 5 elements back to the Thomas Cole image. Now you're seeing it differently. You can see it through these 5 different possibilities. And some more. Form, the time that you see, values, different kinds of values. And then you can think about it in terms of the principles of art. Emphasis and balance and harmony and variety and movement and proportion and rhythm and unity. Let's look at the image again. The emphasis, the point or points of focus that you see in the composition, or the balance, the sense of visual equilibrium. What about harmony? The balanced use of similar elements, or variety, the use of different or often contrasting elements that create visual interest. Or movement, the way the shapes and the lines and the colours and the forms all direct your eye around the composition, suggesting motion. Or proportion, the relative scale of objects and shapes in an image. Or rhythm, the path your eye follows, a regular or repeating arrangement of shapes or colours or whatever. And its sense of unity, its overall coherence. When you learn these elements and principles, you walk back out into the world. If you walk outside the Toledo Museum of Art, you'll go next door and see Frank Gehry's very remarkable Centre for the Visual Arts. And you'll start to see it with the visuals of its lines and its shape and its colour, its space, its texture, and all those principal elements, whether it's harmonious or proportional, whether it's a unified composition. Or you go back into the Toledo Museum of Art and you see Jacques-Louis David's The Oath of the Horatii, and you read these arched areas in the background as a space that encompasses these figures, these dramatic gestures, the triangles, the various volumes. You start to read it much more easily. Now there's lots of ways we can do this. Some of you may love birding, looking at the differences and the similarities between birds. Some of you may collect postage stamps, play golf, play baseball, do lots of things that cause you to look very, very carefully. Study the difference between roses, the difference between colours, and you learn how to spot the difference. Lots of publications these days have crosswords and Sudoku, but not many have spot the difference, and it's a great game. Look at this image. The one on the right is different from the one on the left, but you're already looking at it in terms of the elements and principles. Now pause it and look very carefully for the differences. Did you spot them all? It's difficult, but the more we train our eyes to see, the easier it becomes. Some people walking into the Toledo Museum of Art see the cloister in the museum, and maybe don't notice that those arches, those round shapes in the background, are different from the pointed ones in the foreground. So this cloister with its sides all came from different places. Those of you who would know art history would know that the round-shaped arches are earlier, from the Romanesque period, and the near ones are Gothic, later. There are lots of different approaches we can have to being visually literate. In art museums, we can study art history. We can analyse works of art over time. We can also use the formal approaches that we've talked about in terms of the elements of art and the principles of design. But we can also study iconology, symbols and what they mean, or ideology, when images give you different aspects of beliefs, values, or of ideas. Or semiotics, one of the great subjects of the 20th century for us, the differences between signs and a signifier and what's signified, or hermeneutics, which is the literal and intended meaning. And all this will help us to become more visually literate, to become more sensorially aware. Looking at this image, some of you will see quickly the object in the center, and some of you will see the white-shaped faces looking at each other. And then you'll say to each other, "I see what you mean."
Okay, so now we see that we know what visual literacy is, obviously. And it says right here that the purpose of teaching students to think critically about historical photograph is not to produce scores of historians, but rather to develop critically competent citizens. Students need the powerful analysis tools to negotiate the deluge of visual data, including photographs comprising the world away from school. The proposed exemplar lesson around which this article is written was designed to refine students' abilities to collect and analyze data. So that's why they're saying we're going to use this sample lesson that we have on this article towards the end, which is going to show you how you can help guide them through with visual literacy. Because they are ubiquitous in contemporary American society, photographs may be the most educative and engaging visual document around which teachers can center instruction. Tangible and digitally formatted photographs are very likely to be carried in someone's wallet or purse, collected in folders, iPads, tablet PCs, gathered in books, or family albums. So pictures they capture reality. Teachers should expect their students are likely to consider photographs intrinsically true and objective. So we have to be careful whenever we show them photographs, because sometimes they believe that photographs are absolutely real. But as we know from the Civil War, the photographs that Matthew Brady made, a lot of those were staged whenever he would put the bodies up and make it after a battle and stage it up. So we need to be aware of that, and that's one thing we're going to definitely have to deal with. Difficulties in learning with visual documents. Critical thinking about visual data, such as historical photographs, includes significant challenges for learning. Among the challenges are that learners rarely consider visual data academically worthwhile. They rarely accept various people can view the same data and think differently about it. So that's another thing right there. And typically are unfamiliar with the vocabulary, syntax, and grammar of most historical genres. In order to develop visual literacy and critical thinking skills in their students, teachers need to teach their students historical content, common artistic conventions, and specific references to cultural norms of given time periods. So you cannot just use pictures solely. You need to also give them a context of what this information is about. Implications from recent studies of historical images. Values conveyed through visual imagery. In a study of Year 6 students in Australia, found that a class of 11 and 12-year-olds were able to construct a meaningful understanding of that nation's democratic style and the electoral system from the information they gathered from interpreting written and visual text. This also talks about why this study seems to support finding concerning the importance of scaffolding. So we need to make sure that we use scaffolding when we teach with pictures. I'm going to show you a video at this time of scaffolding.
Learning always proceeds from the known to the new. Good teaching recognizes and builds on this through scaffolding. A student learning new skills and concepts is like a carpenter building a house. In order to build the house safely and correctly, carpenters need to stand on scaffolding until they're ready to move on to the next stage of construction. The construction of learning starts from the ground up. The new is built on top of the known. In the learning environment, teachers provide scaffolding to support the construction of new learning for individual and groups of students. Scaffolding provides students with the just right supports they need to participate in learning, complete a challenging task, or learn a new concept. Scaffolding encourages students to continuously grow and develop to a level that is just above their current level. Scaffolding is a way to gradually shift the responsibility for learning from the teacher to the student and help learners become more independent. Scaffolding builds on the understanding that students learn in many ways, build new knowledge based on prior experiences and knowledge, and need to be supported in learning when they cannot achieve on their own. To plan just right scaffolding, teachers need to understand what an individual student or group of students can do independently. Effective scaffolded instruction starts with knowing students' strengths and needs, provides tailored assistance that is adjusted on an as-needed basis, controls for frustration and builds learner confidence, uses descriptive feedback so students understand what they are doing right and how they can do better. And just as it is for the carpenter moving through the stages of construction, as students' abilities in a particular area improve, scaffolds can be gradually reduced or removed. For students with learning difficulties, the intensity of scaffolding may change, but it may need to be ongoing so students can continue to actively participate in learning and move forward. When planning for scaffolded instruction, ask yourself, what does this student or group of students currently know, and what can they do? What do they need to know and be able to do? How big is the learning gap? What scaffolds will help them bridge this gap, but still keep the learning challenging? Common scaffolds for learning include tapping into or building background knowledge, modeling by the teacher or other students, guided practice, I do, you do. Prompts such as visual supports or step-by-step directions. Strategy instruction, use of graphic organizers. Technology can also provide flexible, unobtrusive scaffolds for learning. For example, for a student with reading difficulties, text-to-speech and having digital text read aloud might be the scaffold they need to access content for project work. This technology may be a scaffold some students use throughout their lives. For other students, such as a student learning English, text-to-speech might scaffold their learning until they develop stronger independent reading and language skills. To maximize student success, the use of any scaffold, including technology, must be combined with effective instruction. Instructional scaffolding is one way teachers can design learning environments that support the success of every student. For more information on supporting every student, visit the Alberta Education website.
All right, so as you look at this proposed exemplar lesson plan, what follows is an answer to call for employing visual data. So this is their lesson plan that they're actually creating. They looked at, the lesson was developed to be a platform agnostic. Students could experience this lesson utilizing the latest devices and technology, the iPad, PC, dry erase boards. Students could perhaps just as meaningful experience a lesson with an overhead projector, a slide, so they made it where it was tech friendly. The lesson was titled The Great Depression Era Historical Photographs of the 1920s and the 30s, and it was designed to be taught to students as an initial 90-minute grabber lesson, so a first day of your unit plan. And it talks about what they did. In the specific lesson shared here, students used multiple intelligences, modeling for the whole class, assigning the class to work in small groups, and then involving the class in discussing the photographs. And then it talks about the introduction, the responses, how they waned. Next, move into the transition. See, they give you a breakdown of everything you need to put in your lesson plan. Remind students, Next, distribute to students a copy of the student handout. There's that with pictures. Let's go ahead and show you some pictures of the Great Depression so you can kind of get in that frame of mind. Right here it says the intersection of visual literacy and historical thinking comprises the next part of the lesson and may take up to 45 minutes. And it breaks down right here. The first historical photograph to be analyzed is Dorothea Lange's Migrant Family. And then the students learn about Lange's Migrant Family. Remind students that they do not have to have a lot of background knowledge to begin thinking more deeply about visual imagery. Just to make sure that you're listening to this lecture, please email me at this time the word family. That's all you got to do, family. It shows that you've listened to the lecture. Next, place students into small groups, into 3 or 4. It might be best to create these groups prior to the day of the lesson plan, after the groups. So it's just a really good lesson plan which breaks down everything. So this talks about the importance of historical knowledge and then gives you a very strong lesson on how to do this material right here. So what's your homework assignment? Real easy. Make a one-day lesson plan. Make a one-day lesson plan where you document this. So I want you to document in TaskStream is fine. You can send me a web link to that. One day, I want you to break down this lesson plan in a one day. So you need to figure out what their objective is. You can make that up. You can do it. You do not worry about enrichment remediation. Type down their procedures, type down the materials, and type down their assessment. Simple as that. So all you have to do is a one-day TaskStream lesson plan or a one-class period for 90 minutes where you make the objective and make the material. And then submit that to me. Next week, we were on Thanksgiving break. And then the week after, I believe we have, it will be online, I believe. I think that's true. Next week, the week after Thanksgiving, let me pull up my calendar. No, next week is no next after the week after Thanksgiving we're going to come back in. So come back in. So next week is Thanksgiving, and then the week after, go ahead and bring this lesson plan in, and that's your homework assignment, and you'll be good to go. Hopefully you enjoyed the lesson. I'm going to also attach this to the email, this article, so you can read it and maybe bring some ideas of that into your lesson plan, your unit plan that you're doing. Thanks so much for listening.